Hello everyone, welcome to Growth Version, a channel that shares the essential lessons learned from good books. Our world today has transformed from a place of scarcity to an excess of all kinds, short-term pleasure. It provides us with all kinds of digital addictions that never existed before. If, in the 1980s, television was the typical source of addictive entertainment, today smartphones have become the source of all other pleasure addictions such as social media, shopping, gambling, or sex, and also a favorable factor for other addictions when communication is easy and fast, convenient access more than it is like a syringe of this era ready to provide each of us with any amount of digital dopamine 24/7. We are no longer strangers to the hormone dopamine. It has become the precursor, the common currency to measure the addictiveness of each experience is dopamine, the energy source that drives us to relentlessly pursue every pleasure. If you are not careful and not really aware of your own behavior, you can easily be swallowed up by the endless pursuit of pleasure and end up lost in the desires you created and lost, freedom, and the ability to enjoy life to the fullest. So, the question here is how to enjoy the pleasures of the times without letting it easily dominate our lives. The book, Dopamine Nation, by Professor of Psychiatry, Anna Lemke, will give you the answer to the topic of dopamine, which is not new, but to talk about dopamine and dopamine control based on decoding the neuroscience and psychology of human desire. People are probably not enough. We need human experience to overcome. But the most convincing and useful real-life experience is probably asking the addicts who have been addicted and overcome their addiction in the book. These are the author's patients. And even the author herself, Anna Lemke, she is a doctor, professor of psychiatry and addiction medicine at the University of Stanford, director of the Tran Clinic, Stanford School of Medicine and School of Addiction Medicine, has more than 100 articles in prestigious journals and holds many important positions in state and national addiction organizations. Now let's go through today's shared content. Pleasure, pain, understanding to balance the nature of addictions. In 1957, dopamine was first identified as a neurotransmitter in the brain. The more dopamine a person releases in the neurotransmitter pathway when performing a certain behavior, the more addictive that behavior will be. But many people still think that dopamine will be released when we are satisfied with certain desires, such as drinking a cool glass of milk tea, lying on the bed, watching movies, surfing the phone, smoking a cigarette, raising one glass after another with friends, being immersed in a feeling of pleasure of sex, etc. In fact, the amount of dopamine released peaks not at the moment you receive the reward or perform the desired behavior, but when you crave to do those things. You must understand that dopamine is what controls and coordinates your behavior. It creates for you a burning desire and motivation to pursue your goals, regardless of whether they bring you lasting joy and satisfaction, and whether they cause you regrets. For example, when you overeat you gain weight. When you drink too much alcohol, headache, fatigue, adultery causes broken families, gambling causes debt, deadlock, etc. Even though knowing the consequences are unpredictable but still rushing in like a moth to a flame. You can better understand the mechanism of dopamine secretion through a gambler's behavior. The strong dopamine release is not when they win and make a profit, but it is related to their inability to predict the possibility of winning the gamble, the unexpected and unpredictable outcome before, and the craving for the reward causes the brain to release dopamine and drive gambling behavior. If you win, dopamine continues to be released because of the satisfaction. But if losing, you will not expect that the amount of dopamine will even increase significantly. So patients with severe gambling addiction will admit that a part of them wants to lose, which will further motivate the losing player to make special efforts. Especially if the probability of winning or losing is equal to about 50%, the amount of dopamine will reach the highest level, making it difficult for gambling addicts to give up. The two main like buttons on social networking applications are erratic and unpredictable, makes one crave for the reward of getting a constant like button, has the pleasure of posting engaging moments, Or is it the short video app that is taking the world by storm today that makes many addicts able to surf for hours on end? It's also because your brain constantly releases large amounts of dopamine when you anticipate that you'll be watching interesting videos next. The software's algorithm has memorized your preferences, habits, and needs and will alternately provide them, gives you what you want to see, and this creates a never-ending loop of stimulation that reinforces the scrolling behavior and makes it hard to stop. So, in summary, in a broad sense, addiction is the consumption of a substance or performing a behavior in a compulsive manner, regardless of its harmful effects on oneself or others. It stems from the instinct to seek pleasure and avoid pain. But when pleasure is too much and easily accessible, abuse will cause addiction. That is the price to pay if each person does not learn to live proactively and in balance. Here you need to understand the process that makes you addicted to a substance or some behavior like this. Imagine pleasure and pain are two sides of a scale. Initially, when the scale is in balance, once you experience the pleasure, comfort, for example, from drinking a cup of milk tea, watching interesting videos on TikTok, or shopping, playing games, smoking weed, etc., is when the brain releases dopamine, and the scale will tilt towards pleasure. The more this scale tilts, the faster you will feel it, more joy, but all living things, including humans, tend to maintain balance, physiological state, or homeostasis. So when the balance is in favor of pleasure, the balance is activated, then the balance must tilt back towards pain, but for the balance to be truly achieved, the balance of pain must tilt in its favor in proportion equal to pleasure. So you will feel uncomfortable after a short time of experiencing the pleasure from dopamine. We often hear that, there is up, there must be down, there are times of high, there must be times of low, so all pleasure comes at a price, because the pain that follows is more lasting and painful than the pleasure itself. The famous social scientist, Richard Solomon, once said in his opposing theory that every departure from the state of pleasure or neutralizing emotions for a long time or repeatedly will have to pay the price, which is the afterreaction, which has the opposite value to the stimulus. Most of us at this time will not want to experience. We cannot resist the uncomfortable, restless feeling of emptiness after continued pleasure. Indulge in your own urges to create good feelings from eating another cake, sweet surf the net a little longer, buy one more set of clothes, gamble one more time, etc. We think our behavior is still under the control of reason, but in fact, we are controlled by the temptation of dopamine. Over many years, we'll weaken the ability to recognize addictive behavior and self-regulate, and just follow the call of dopamine unconsciously. Like that, our brain is incredibly adaptable, meaning the more we follow the dopamine call, the higher our threshold for experiencing pleasure will be, and we will need more of our favorite behaviors to feel good again. Although the author was addicted to erotic romance novels, she needed more and more intense, passionate, and heavy versions of the novels to achieve the same level of satisfaction as the author's patient had initially. Drug users also have to increase the dose to feel the same level of excitement at the beginning. Shopping addicts also buy more and more expensive things to experience the feeling. Typical satisfaction is a patient of the author addicted to sex until he finally had to build himself a stimulation machine and stay in a state of pleasure for hours. Career ruined, family broken, and many other prices to pay are not enough to awaken the man. For many years, not only the increase of such pleasurable experiences, our pain threshold will also decrease. Simply understand that we no longer feel the simple joys of life, but become extremely sensitive and weak to even the smallest pains in life. In other words, we need more rewards to feel happier, but less injury alone is enough to cause us pain. At this point, we will fall into a situation that is the breakdown of the homeostatic state, that is, when a person's brain loses the elasticity needed to restore the balance of pleasure and pain. The lack of dopamine makes the scales now stick to pain. No amount of pleasure can bring it back into balance. But this does not mean that we no longer have the urge to seek addictive pleasures. But more painfully, we seek pleasures to relieve pain, which is the condition of people with mental illnesses, such as depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, schizophrenia, or sleep problems, etc. This fractured state can even cause a person's brain to change forever. That is the damage caused by substance abuse. Addictive behavior is irreversible, especially those addicted to drugs, meth, alcohol, or marijuana. But we do not need to be pessimistic when there is good news that we can still create networks, new neural networks around the damaged area. By building healthy habits and behaviors, simply learning a new skill or language can help you release dopamine, or focusing on a job and dedication to it also helps you release dopamine. However, balancing this homeostasis requires special care. Avoid cross-addiction, which means any behavior that produces any product, including drugs, that has a stimulant effect has the potential to be addictive, and it will tip the balance even more heavily toward pain. If the use of sedatives makes you dependent on drugs, and it makes insomnia worse, quitting smoking but switching to tobacco, quitting alcohol but drinking soft drinks, quitting gambling by working hard, is not a long-term solution and really effective. We have no other better way than to accept the pain to overcome it, and when our homeostasis is broken, we no longer feel joy in life. Moreover, now if we press the pain side of the scale, what will happen? We come to the next part, when pain triggers the experience of pleasure. Mi Shen, a man that the author told, after quitting alcohol and cocaine by playing tennis, but he still couldn't escape the uncomfortable withdrawal, then he accidentally discovered a way to help himself fill up the negative hole in my heart, that is an ice bath. An ice bath will initially cause extreme pain, but then it is a very refreshing feeling. Maintain an ice bath every day for 3 years. He has said that when he stepped out of the ice bath, the feeling was like being high on drugs for hours, which had originally tipped his balance of pleasure and pain to the side of pain. Soaking in the water, Mi Shen's tone represents impacting the pain side of the scales. When pressing the pain scales, the brain's self-balancing mechanism is strongly activated again, causing the natural pleasure set point to work and leaning back towards pleasure. This was studied by Charles University, and the results showed that after soaking in cold water, a person's dopamine levels increased steadily throughout the soaking time and reached a maximum at around 250% in 1 hour and gradually decreased in the second hour, but still high compared to normal. In fact, in the 1820s, the ice bath method was used to treat physical and psychological disorders and has also been applied and brought many effects. Not only ice baths, but we all go through a similar version when pain gives way to joy, even though when your mood improves after each time you recover from an illness, feeling relieved relaxing after each time you jog, feeling happy loving life after a lucky escape, etc. However, it died out over 2,000 years ago. It was once said that pleasure and pain are two things that whenever you find one, you will surely experience the other as if they were bitten into the same end. Initially, you find pleasure. Later, when you experience pain, you will continue to experience pain after the pleasure you get. Mi Shen too, after a long time in ice water, his pleasure threshold has increased, which means the balance is back leaning more towards pain, so had to find a way to increase the dosage of the ice bath by immersing myself in the freezer to keep the cold water near freezing the whole time, soaking time to release more dopamine. In other words, he has started to get addicted to pain. Scientists have shown that stress can increase the release of dopamine in the brain's reward pathway the same way a person who uses drugs or methamphetamine experiences themselves. Extreme sports like skydiving, kitesurfing, surfing, skiing, cycling, ziplining, and canyoning are all sports. Sports impact very strongly and quickly on the pain side of the scale and immediately release a huge amount of dopamine just like strong drugs do. That's why playing risky games like this will face risk of addiction and a lingering sense of unease that they will not engage in regular activities, and they are susceptible to losing interest in other normal activities of life if they tip the scales too far to the pain side of the scale. Long term, it is very easy to get dopamine deficiency that makes addiction. Pain is the really bad thing. Like the author's patient who ran so much that he broke his legs but still can't stop running. After the treatment, people have to use clean knives on their limbs to get the feeling of excitement and control their chaotic mind. Today, we have an addiction that more and more people are suffering from. You must increase, that is work addiction. Work addiction also belongs to the behavior of pushing the pain side of the scale, and it is very easy for people to rationalize their work addiction because it is a legitimate thing. However, like no matter what painful addiction, it becomes a trap if you abuse it too much and then lose connection with family and friends for the rest of your life and have to pay unwanted prices for it. Health. So, how do we balance the scales and live a healthy life? First, we need to abstain from dopamine to re-establish the pleasure-pain balance. Why abstain from dopamine? The author asserts that if we wait long enough, our brains can always readapt to a drug-free state, and our bodies will re-establish homeostasis, basic lips, that is, a balanced scale that helps you enjoy the simple little joys. The steps of abstaining from dopamine are explained by the author as follows, starting with the letters of dopamine. The first is the letter D, data means, that is, you need to look back at the information related to your regular consumption of addictive substances to determine whether you are addicted or not and to what extent. Look at the urge to consume addictive substances or foods, exhibit addictive behavior compulsively. For example, you find yourself spending too much of your free time staying up late playing games or watching movies, surfing the internet, smoking regularly, eating sweets regularly, or drinking beer and wine with every meal. Only then can you enjoy drinking coffee every morning and be alert enough to work. If you can't clearly identify your addiction, of course, giving up won't happen. The second is the letter O, object, that is, identify the purpose for which you use the addictive substance. For example, you smoke to relieve stress from work, watch movies because you have too much free time, or feel a lack of love or feeling, or surfing social networks because of sadness, losing too much sleep, drinking alcohol, doing drugs because of wanting to forget some hardship or suffering, or because close friends drag you in, shopping addiction because of feeling unloved. The author herself turned to romance novels to escape the painful feeling of helplessness as she began the difficult process of raising a teenager. The third difficulty and stress is the letter P. Problems are the problems that arise when abusing addictive substances. For example, long-term smoking affects physical health, such as lung cancer, nasopharynx, stomach disease, etc. Staying up late playing games and watching movies causes sleep disorders and reduces resistance, leading to many diseases in the long term. Alcohol causes nerve paralysis, reduces memory, affects the digestive system, and the body's resistance, liver, and kidney dysfunction, etc., and negative effects on relationships are many negative effects that you need to clearly identify because otherwise as you age, over the years, the consequences will multiply many times. The fourth is the letter A, abstinence. Abstinence, as said, is necessary to restore homeostasis, so how long is abstinence enough? Research of scientists, neuroscientist Laura Volker, found that addicts' dopamine levels remained below average 2 weeks after stopping drug use, giving her and Professor Struck the perfect amount of time to rebalance the scales. A follow-up of 1 month showed that in alcoholic patients after 1 month of abstinence from alcohol, 80% of them no longer had clinical symptoms of depression, indicating that there was no longer dopamine deficiency. So, the minimum time here takes 1 month to abstain. However, depending on age, the time can be shortened for young people or longer for older people, and also depending on different addictive substances, it can be easier or more difficult. For example, quitting gaming is easier than quitting smoking, quitting caffeine is easier than quitting alcohol, etc. And this abstinence is not recommended for individuals with severe addiction and can cause shock or even death if suddenly quit addiction. And also note that about 20% of those who abstain from substance quit addiction cannot feel better, then it is very likely that they are suffering from mental disorders that need treatment. At the same time, along with detoxification, it can bring about the fifth result, which is the letter M, mindfulness. Mindfulness in this situation is separating from yourself to observe your emotions. Feeling the painful sting of an addiction's urges without judgment is not easy to do, because the part of the brain that observes everything that happens is also our brain, which is very susceptible to we judge, push away those feelings and run away from the present moment. If you push away or judge, or try to run away, then the addiction will not go away, it will continue to exist and the urge will become stronger. Like death, Krishnamurti once said that, the more you resist a habit, the more it becomes stronger, but if you pay attention, by becoming aware of the habit without resisting it, you will find that the habit ends when the time is right. Only by allowing yourself to feel and endure the emotions of your addictions, will your mental boundaries be loosened. The enlightened awareness will help you be clear-minded and make choices. The mindfulness method has also been shared in great detail in the book, Finding the Addiction in Every Human Being, by author Judson Brewer. Fifth, is the letter Y, insight meaning. Insight here is insight into one's own behavior during the process of abstaining from dopamine. Overcoming the bad feeling of gloom or symptoms such as vomiting, dizziness, no matter how severe the nausea is, once you realize that these are the experiences you are forced to go through when quitting, it will motivate you to keep going. The anxiety, paranoia, and spending too much time on drugs will be gone. Time and mind for the suffering will gradually lessen. It is at this time that you will begin to regain inspiration and joy in life and at the same time be able to realize that addiction has dominated and controlled your life terribly, like a curtain of countless layers covering your eyes that you never considered a problem before. Next, Saturday. That's the end. Next steps. The next step is to abstain for about a month, and you decide whether or not to resume using the herb and how to use it. Most of the author's patients still use it, but use it in a different way, less and more controlled, like having moderation in using mobile phones, drinking less, and more proactively, etc. Lastly, the letter E, experiment, means experiment when you use your former addiction in a controlled manner while finding other simple joys in life, such as meeting and talking with family members. That is when you balance the pleasure with the pain of each other. Once you have become balanced, we can decide to abstain long-term or forever from addictive substances such as drugs, tobacco, alcohol, etc. But for technical drugs, digital devices like smartphones are inseparable from our lives and work, but we still need to use them, and how can we best control them without relapse? Let's go to the next step. Next is self-restraint. Self-restraint is simply understood as the way to actively create a barrier between yourself and the harmful substance to eliminate the behavior of overconsumption. The key to this method is recognition. The limits of willpower make us lose control before the strong pressure of temptation, but still imply active choice. The barrier is created as a pause button between your desire and action, and this method can be divided into three groups as follows. First is spatial self-restraint or physical restraint, which means creating actual physical barriers or geographical distance between oneself and the substance. For example, give your phone to a colleague to hold when you need to concentrate on work. Eliminate all unhealthy sugary foods from your living and working space. Use cash to shop instead of credit cards. Eliminate all alcohol in the family. Van. Why should we preach about space? Because you need to understand that willpower is not the infinite resource of man. It is like a muscle that is exercised too much, will cause fatigue of the will and cannot resist the temptation of addictive substances for a long time. So physical restraint will limit the fatigue of the will, save you energy, and be effective in preventing relapse. However, there are some forms of physical restraint that can have potential consequences that we need to consider, such as surgery to help lose weight. Gastric banding, gastric bypass, or gastric bypass surgery to make the stomach smaller to reduce stomach capacity or bypass the part of the intestine that absorbs nutrients. Many people after surgery still maintain unhealthy eating habits, dilate the already reduced stomach, causing complications requiring further surgery. Others switch from overeating to drinking. Research shows that out of every 4 people who have this surgery to lose weight, a person starts to become addicted to alcohol. This surgery changes the way alcohol is metabolized, increasing the rate of alcohol absorption, making the drinker drunk faster and longer with less alcohol, and making them easily cross-addicted. The next method of self-restraint is time restraint, which means limiting the consumption of addictive substances to certain times of the day, week, or month in order to narrow down the level of consumption. For example, don't surf social media, watch TikTok, or play games before going to bed and after waking up. Only drink alcohol on days off, don't smoke during working hours, or be bound by achievement. For example, only buy certain items when you achieve a bonus or only using your phone after exercising, etc. Proactively teaching yourself time will help you track the amount of time you spend consuming addictive substances more consciously. You will find it even easier to reduce your consumption when you think about your entire life's time fund rather than the momentary gratification of the present moment. We will have an accurate view of your daily behaviors that will delay desires or give up meaningless behaviors. Moreover, the more free time you have, the more likely you are to become addicted to something. So don't let yourself have too much extra time. Part-time jobs and new skills to learn are all easily accessible in our time. They will help you have a healthier, better, and more meaningful life. Third is self-imposed restraint in the sense that category is the practice of limiting your consumption by dividing dopamine into small categories of what is allowed to be consumed and what is not allowed. For example, you can use your phone to read news, listen to books, but not watch short videos, don't install movies, or download unhealthy content. You can eat out but never order unhealthy fried food, or for example, people who play a lot, gambling should not watch sports news, cut off contact with people who often invite people, etc. In short, all 3 methods of self-restraint are often misunderstood as being too much of stereotypes, but this is the way to give you freedom from the restraint of compulsive consumption behavior. Finally, we need to have the following notes. First, be absolutely honest. Honesty will encouraging you to be more aware of your own behavior means allowing you to become more aware of the pleasure-pain balance and the processes that drive your compulsive consumption behavior, thereby changing your own behavior more effectively. Secondly, honesty also helps nurture relationships and helps you live a meaningful life spreading goodness to those around you. Secondly, don't be dominated by negative feelings of shame. Shame is a negative feeling bad about yourself when you are addicted to something. But it is this feeling of shame that will become the motivation that makes you easily give up negative habits. But once you let the feeling of shame become negative, it will drag you down deeper. The key here is to be around people who accept you for who you are. It helps you change and be better. You are willing to be honest and receive sympathy from them. Now feeling accepted and connected will make you set yourself up in the direction of reducing excessive consumption of addictive substances. Finally, don't run away, but integrate into modern social life. It is now more bustling, but also more stressful. To face the loneliness and emptiness in each person's heart is also greater when real-life connections with life are limited by the convenience of technology, so we can easily fill our loneliness, escape the pain, distract ourselves with different addictive methods, hoping to relieve the fatigue of the harshness of life. But in the end, trouble increases when pain becomes worse. So don't run away from whatever happens to you, face it. Even though there are many unknown things ahead, you will not let yourself get carried away by bad habits that can paralyze and ruin your whole life. And always remember that whether it's pleasure or pain, sometimes it depends on the meaning we attribute to itself. As long as you are willing to experience everything in your life, then nothing can control you anymore. When we talk about dopamine, we are not just referring to it as a chemical in the brain, but also talks about how each of us manages emotions, behavior, and habits in our daily lives to live a more independent and healthy life. Hopefully, today's book can provide you with useful knowledge to help you balance your life in the most harmonious way. Thank you for listening to the end of today's video. I would like to end it here. If you find this video useful, please share it with everyone and don't forget to give me a like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more insightful content like this. Goodbye and see you soon. See you guys in the next videos.